Confident that the cleaning lady was ignorant, the millionaire CEO and his partners switched languages to discuss their secret plans in front of her. "Don't worry, she doesn't understand anything," he mocked. They laughed and spoke openly until the oldest partner stood up and stopped the conversation. Looking at the CEO, he revealed, "Actually, she owns all of this and came disguised today just to see who you really were." The silence that followed was deadly. The tension in the boardroom of Ventura Global Partners, situated in the pulsing heart of Midtown Manhattan, was an entity unto itself, dense, almost palpable. The air conditioning, cranked to a glacial chill, failed to dissipate the heat radiating from nerves stretched taut. Marcus, the U.S. CEO, felt sweat gather discreetly at the nape of his neck, but his face was an impassive mask of iron confidence. He gesticulated with one hand while the other controlled the presentation on his tablet, displaying charts and figures that painted a picture of calculated success. His eyes scanned the faces of the partners, lingering for an extra instant on Mr. Watanabe, the representative of the Japanese conglomerate that had recently injected massive capital into the firm, acquiring a majority stake. Watanabe was an older man whose silence was more intimidating than any sharp questioning. His dark eyes, framed by thin-rimmed glasses, seemed to analyze not just the numbers, but the soul of the person speaking. Midway through Marcus's presentation, the solid oak door opened with an almost inaudible whisper. Elena, the recently hired cleaning woman, entered. She carried a silver tray with porcelain cups and a thermos of steaming coffee. Her movements were silent, practiced to be unobtrusive, to be invisible. She wore a simple grey uniform, impeccably clean, yet it highlighted her as an anomaly in that environment of bespoke suits and luxury watches. As she served the coffee, one of the junior partners interrupted himself, visible discomfort crossing his expression as he noticed her presence. Marcus, sensing the hesitation, let out a low, arrogant laugh, a sound that echoed coldly in the room. "Don't worry, she doesn't understand a thing," he said, with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. To prove his point, and in a gesture of exhibitionism toward the principal investor, he switched effortlessly into impeccable Japanese, a language he mastered with the same calculated fluency as his financial spreadsheets. "As I was saying, Mr. Watanabe," Marcus continued in the foreign tongue, the tone now more conspiratorial, "we'll need to cook the Q3 figures. It's a simple maneuver to protect our assets and guarantee positive cash flow for the report. We'll blame the deficit on the old management, lay off 30% of the baseline staff, and use the saved money to pay our bonuses. An investment in our own genius." He glanced sideways at Elena, who was now silently collecting the empty cups, her face impassive. "She," he gestured with his head toward her, "will be the first to go. She's just part of the furniture. She won't understand a word of what we're planning to guarantee the profitability of our stock valuation." For several minutes, he detailed unethical schemes, the restructuring of funds, and the manipulation of liabilities to inflate the company's net worth, all under Watanabe's attentive, silent gaze. Elena continued her work, her expression indecipherable. When Marcus concluded his arrogant speech, a smug smile playing on his lips, he waited for the nod of approval, the compliment for his cunning. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with an electricity no one could comprehend. It was then that Mr. Watanabe stood up. His movements were slow, filled with an ancient dignity. He did not look at Marcus. His eyes were fixed on Eleanor, who had paused near the door, ready to exit. "Your Japanese is excellent, Marcus," Mr. Watanabe said, and the words, spoken in clear, unaccented English, cracked like a whip. "But hers is native." Marcus froze, the blood draining from his face, his smug smile dissolving into a mask of pure panic. Mr. Watanabe walked over to Elena, who stopped moving, and then, to the shock of everyone in the room, he performed a bow, a deep, formal, and undeniably respectful bow. "Madam Yumi, is your assessment complete?" Everyone's eyes darted from Eleanor to Mr. Watanabe, and then back to Marcus's pale, disbelieving face. The air became so thin that breathing felt like a conscious, difficult act. For Eleanor, or rather, for Yumi Tanaka, that moment was the culmination of weeks of silent anguish, a burden she had carried while scrubbing floors and polishing the tables of the company she built. The stooped posture, the result of days spent feigning subservience, shed away like a cocoon. Her back straightened, her chin lifted, and the forced humility in her gaze was replaced by a cold, cutting authority forged in decades of experience and grief. She looked at Mr. Watanabe, a longtime friend of her late husband, and responded in perfect Japanese, the language of her parents, the language of their secrets. Her voice was clear, melodic, but charged with a firmness none of the present would ever associate with the silent janitor. The exchange was brief, a concise and final report between two generals after a won battle. Then she turned. Her focus, like a laser, found Marcus, who was still paralyzed, the coffee cup trembling in his hand, spilling a dark stream onto important documents. "I founded this company with my late husband on the bedrock of honor, Mr. Marcus," she said, and her English, previously hesitant and quiet, now resonated with the power of the one who signs the checks, not on fraud to inflate our net worth. The name of her husband, Kenji, echoed in her mind. She recalled the sleepless nights, the hurried dinners over piles of papers, the dream they shared. They weren't just seeking money. They sought to build a legacy, a fortune based on hard work and integrity, a business that could sustain families and generate real value, not just speculative stock market profits. Every brick of this building, every contract signed, was proof of their sacrifice. To see Marcus, a man who had been handed everything on a silver platter, treat that legacy with such disdain, planning schemes to guarantee illicit bonuses and dividends, was a profanity. The pain she felt hearing his plans wasn't just for the company, but for Kenji's memory. Mr. Watanabe, seeing the resolution in her eyes, delivered the final blow. He addressed the pale, trembling CEO, his voice calm, yet every word was a nail in the coffin of Marcus's career. "Marcus, she is not the janitor. She is Yumi Tanaka. She is the owner of all this. And she came disguised to see who you truly were." The shock in the room was audible, a series of gasps and chokes. Yumi then picked up the cleaning cloth she still held and, with a deliberate, final gesture, tossed it into the waste bin she was carrying. The disguise was officially discarded. "Mr. Watanabe, please call security." Her voice brooked no argument. "Mr. Marcus and everyone who agreed with him are terminated." The silence was broken by the sound of the intercom. In under a minute, two tall men, in suits with severe expressions, entered the room. They moved with silent efficiency, one on each side of Marcus, who offered no resistance. He was a hollow shell, the arrogant gleam in his eyes replaced by abject terror. As they led him out, the trajectory of his power crumbling in mere seconds, Yumi observed the faces of the remaining partners. Fear, confusion, and growing panic danced in their eyes. She let the silence stretch, allowing the weight of what had just happened to settle. Her gaze rested on the partner who had felt uncomfortable with her presence. He swallowed hard, unable to sustain eye contact. "The meeting," Yumi said, her voice echoing in the now tense room, "is not over. Now, we will discuss the future of this capital." The echo of Yumi's words, "Now, we will discuss the future of this capital," hung in the room like a dense fog. She walked with deliberate calm, the soft sound of her simple shoes on the expensive carpet, the only noise breaking the stunned silence. She rounded the long, polished mahogany table, a piece of furniture she herself had cleaned so many times in the past weeks, and paused before the main chair, Marcus's chair. For an instant, she only observed it. It was more than a seat. It was a throne, a symbol of the power he had usurped and corrupted. With a gesture that was both a reclamation and a burden, she sat down. The cold leather seemed to mold to her body, and from there, the room's perspective was different. The partners' faces, previously distant and blurred, were now clear, every expression of fear and nascent flattery exposed under her gaze. Inside, a deep exhaustion threatened her. The adrenaline that sustained her during the confrontation was beginning to dissipate, leaving behind the raw pain of betrayal and the overwhelming weight of responsibility. This was not a victory she savored. It was a bitter necessity, a painful surgery to save the body of a legacy. The inheritance of honor Kenji had left her, far more valuable than any dollar asset. "I spent the last 3 weeks," Yumi began, her voice steady, cutting through the stillness, observing. "I heard the conversations in the hallways. I saw the spreadsheets left on desks. I felt the culture that settled in this place in my absence." Her gaze swept over each of them, forcing them to meet her eyes. "Some of you were active accomplices of Mr. Marcus, others accomplices by silence. You found it easier to agree than to question, more profitable to ignore ethics in favor of quick gains." She paused, letting the accusation hang. "So, before we talk about the future, I need to know who here still believes in the values this company was founded upon." No one dared to speak. The silence was a collective confession. They were businessmen, accustomed to evaluating assets and liabilities, to calculating risks and profitability. But her question wasn't about numbers. It was about character, and they didn't have a ready answer. The fortune they managed had made them complacent. The incessant pursuit of more money had eroded their foundations. It was then that a voice, hesitant but clear, broke the deadlock. "I believe Madam Tanaka." Rob Adams, the youngest partner, who had remained silent during Marcus's discourse, spoke. His eyes showed a mix of nervousness and sincerity. I never agreed with Marcus's methods, the way he spoke about the employees, the shortcuts he wanted to take. It didn't feel right, but I'm new, my stake is small. I didn't have the courage to object." He swallowed hard, his face flushed. "That's not an excuse. It's a confession. But I joined Ventura Global Partners because I admired its history, yours and your husband's. I want to help fix this." Yumi studied him for a long moment. Was this the speech of an opportunist trying to save his own skin, or the genuine lament of a man who got lost and was now seeking redemption? It was impossible to know, but it was the first spark of something other than fear or greed she had seen in that room. She was about to respond when Mr. Watanabe's grave voice interrupted her. "Yumi-san," he said, his face serious, "I fear we have a more immediate problem." He looked at the tablet in his hands, the screen reflecting in his glasses, the cooking of the Q3 figures Mr. Marcus mentioned. It wasn't just a plan. He paused, and the weight of his next words filled the room. "The fraudulent report, inflating our assets and hiding significant debt was sent to our primary investors and the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, exactly 15 minutes ago." Mr. Watanabe's words fell upon the room like a death sentence. 15 minutes. A quarter of an hour was all that separated Ventura Global Partners from a reputation built over decades and an abyss of mistrust and ruin. The panic, previously an undercurrent, now erupted on the surface. One of the partners, a corpulent man named Alfonso, who had been silent until then, ran his hands over his face, sweat glistening on his forehead. "It's over," he muttered, his voice trembling. "Our stock will turn to dust the moment the market opens. We'll be investigated, sued, All our net worth is at risk. Another, paler and thinner partner began making frantic calculations in a notepad, his desperate whispers about debt interest and loss of confidence from investment funds sounding like a funeral dirge for the wealth they believed they possessed. The chaos was contained, but visceral. They were men who spent their lives managing financial crises, turning capital into more capital. But this was a crisis of character, and they were utterly unprepared. As the wave of fear spread, Yumi felt a cold, crystal fury take the place of shock. This wasn't just negligence, it was a trap, a final act of sabotage by Marcus, a ticking time bomb designed to explode and destroy everything if he was caught. He didn't care about the company, the employees, or the legacy she and Kenji had built with such sacrifice. To him, everything was just a numbers game, a way to accumulate money and power. Kenji's memories surfaced in her mind, sharp and painful. He always said a company's reputation was its most valuable asset, more precious than gold or any high-yield investment. It was the foundation upon which the entire fortune rested, and Marcus, in his final act of contempt, had placed dynamite on that foundation. Her fists clenched beneath the table, nails digging into her palms. She would not let her husband's legacy be reduced to ashes by a man without honor. "Madam Tanaka?" Rob's voice cut through the cacophony of panic. He was the only one looking at her, not at his own potential losses. His young eyes, though scared, held a question, a plea for leadership. What do we do now? The simple question acted as a balm to Yumi's fury, focusing her energy. She took a deep breath, straightened further in the chair, and her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but contained a force that silenced the room instantly. "We are not going to hide." Her eyes swept over each of the partners, challenging them. "We are not going to perpetuate a lie. We built this company on truth, and it is with truth that we will fix it." She turned to Mr. Watanabe, her mind already plotting a risky but necessary action plan. "Watanabe-san, prepare an emergency conference call with the board in Japan. I will speak to them myself." Then she looked at Rob. "You contact our legal team. I want them to prepare an official retraction to be sent to the SEC immediately." The plan was audacious, almost financially suicidal. Admitting the error publicly could accelerate the fall, but it was the only way to begin rebuilding trust. It was the only path Kenji would have approved. "But to do that," Rob said, his mind working quickly, "we need to present the correct numbers. Where is the original report, the real one?" All eyes turned to Mr. Watanabe, who was already typing furiously on his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen in search of the file. A tense silence settled again, the hope of a quick solution hanging in the air. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, Watanabe stopped. He raised his eyes slowly, and the expression on his face made Yumi's stomach clench. "Yumi-san," he began, his voice grave. "The original files, they have been deleted, and the backups for the last 48 hours have also vanished." The revelation that the original data had been erased dropped like a rock in the already tumultuous room. It was a digital checkmate, a scorched earth act that transformed a disaster into a cataclysm. Marcus hadn't just lied and sabotaged. He had destroyed the evidence of his own fraud, taking with him the data that could exonerate the company and prove the truth. The fragile hope that had arisen with Yumi's plan crumbled into dust. Without the real numbers, the retraction she proposed would just be an admission of guilt with no evidence to support their new position. An empty confession that would only confirm suspicions of fraud and mismanagement. Alfonso, the corpulent partner, let out a low groan, sinking into his chair as if the very weight of the air was crushing him. "We are finished. Without the originals, we have no way to prove anything. They will accuse us of complicity, of trying to cover up the hole after being discovered. Our assets will be liquidated to cover the liabilities." His voice was the sound of complete defeat, the surrender of a man who watched his fortune evaporate before his eyes. Yumi felt a cold, crystalline wave wash over her spine. But it wasn't fear, it was the icy coldness of determination. She refused to let despair take hold. The image of Kenji, smiling at her in their small office in the company's early days, his hands dirty with grease from a printing machine they fixed themselves, appeared in her mind. They started with almost nothing, only a dream and an unshakable work ethic. They built their wealth not through risky cryptocurrency speculation or volatile investments, but with sweat, integrity, and a relentless focus on creating real value. She hadn't gone through all that, hadn't sacrificed so much, to be defeated by the digital cowardice of a man like Marcus. Adversity was not new to her. She had faced distrust for being a woman in a man's world, the pain of losing her great love and life partner, and the solitude of carrying an empire alone. This was just one more battle. "No," she said, the word sounding like an order. All eyes turned to her, surprised by the strength in her voice. "It is not over yet." She stood up, walking to the large window that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The city stretched below, a hive of activity and ambition, indifferent to the drama unfolding on this floor. The digital data may be gone, but the truth is not. The truth is recorded elsewhere. It's in the invoices, the signed contracts, the production records, the bank statements. It's in the daily work of the people who make this company run. She turned, her gaze sparking with a new energy. Marcus and his accomplices may have controlled the financial reports, but they didn't control the operation. They didn't know the heart of this company, but I do, and that is where we will find the answers. Her plan began to form, audacious and exhaustive. They would have to reconstruct the last quarter's accounting piece by piece, manually. It would be a Herculean task, a race against time before the market opened and the scandal exploded. "Rob," she commanded, "gather the heads of accounting, logistics, and production departments. Bring them to this room. Tell them it is an emergency decreed by the presidency. Mr. Watanabe, contact our banks. Request copies of all transactions from the last 90 days. Alfonso," she addressed the man who had despaired, "you know our biggest suppliers. Call them. Request duplicates of all orders and invoices." She was distributing tasks, transforming panic into action, paralysis into purpose. Most of the partners looked at her with a mixture of astonishment and doubt, but Rob was already on the phone, his face now lit by a flicker of hope. As the room began to buzz with new, frantic activity, Yumi felt the weight of time on her shoulders. They had, at best, a few hours. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and purple, a beautiful and terrible reminder that a new day, with the opening of the stock exchange, was inexorably approaching. It was in this moment of urgency that her personal cell phone, a simple device she kept separate from the business, vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. Hesitantly, she opened it. There was only one short sentence. "He didn't erase everything. Look for the Phoenix Project. And be careful." The anonymous message shone on Yumi's cell phone screen like a beacon in the storm. The Phoenix Project. The name resonated strangely in her mind. It wasn't a term used in official reports or strategic meetings she had monitored. It seemed like something secret, personal. She looked around, the room now a controlled chaos of phone calls and frantic typing. Who could have sent that? A hidden ally? Or perhaps a final trap left by Marcus? The warning, "Be careful," suggested danger, not just financial, but something more sinister. She put the cell phone away, deciding to keep the information to herself for now. Distrust was still her best companion in that room, full of men who had allowed, by omission or action, the company to reach that point. Yumi approached Marcus's computer, still on, the screen locked. She knew the master admin password, a secret Marcus would never imagine the janitor possessed. With agile fingers, she typed the complex sequence and accessed the system. She began a deep search in the hidden files, ignoring the obvious finance and contract folders. She looked for keywords, dates, anything that could lead to the mysterious project. Nothing. It was as if Phoenix were a digital ghost. Frustrated, she tried to access the server's access logs, hoping to find some trace of recent activity that might indicate where Marcus had hidden his deepest secrets. It was then that she noticed something strange. A remote access made just 10 minutes ago from an external IP using Marcus's credentials. Yumi's heart sped up. Someone was in the system right now. Someone who knew Marcus had been discovered and was trying to, what? Erase more data? Or perhaps copy something vital? She traced the connection, her IT knowledge. Rusty but still functional, being tested to the limit. The signal came from a nearby location, perhaps even inside the building, but routed through external servers to mask the origin. She needed to act fast. If it was an accomplice trying to destroy the last evidence, they would lose everything. If it was the anonymous sender trying to help, she needed to know who it was. "Rob," she called, her voice low so as not to alert the others. He hung up the phone and approached quickly. "I need you to go to the server room in the basement. Now, take one of the security guards with you. Someone is remotely accessing our system with Marcus's credentials. I want you to physically disconnect the main server from the external network. It's the only way to ensure we stop this." Rob's eyes widened, understanding the gravity of the situation. "But that will bring down all our systems. It will stop production. Emails, everything. The damage will be enormous." Yumi stared at him firmly. "The damage of losing the truth will be infinitely greater. Go now." Rob nodded and ran out of the room. Yumi turned her attention back to the screen, watching the progress bar of a file transfer that had just started. The file name was encrypted, but the size was immense. Whoever it was, they were trying to move a massive amount of data. She tried to cancel the transfer, but her access was blocked. The intruder had higher privileges than hers at that moment. It was a race against time. She watched, helpless, as the percentage climbed. 5%, 10%, 15%. Every second that passed was agony. She imagined Rob running down the stairs, the security guard in tow. Imagined them reaching the locked server room door. The transfer reached 40%. Then, suddenly, the screen flickered. An error message appeared. "Connection lost." The digital silence was deafening. Rob had succeeded. A few minutes later, Rob returned, breathless, holding a small USB drive in his hand. "I found this." It was connected directly to one of the main server's service ports. Someone installed a physical backdoor. That's how they were accessing it. He handed the device to Yumi. She held it. Feeling its insignificant weight contained the potential to save or destroy everything that remained. It was the key to the mystery, or the final piece of the disaster. With trembling hands, she connected the USB to Marcus's laptop, now isolated from the network. A single folder appeared on the screen, its name, the Phoenix Project. Upon opening it, Yumi didn't just find financial spreadsheets. She found photos, audio recordings, emails exchanged with competitors, and, at the top of the list, a video file dated that same day. She clicked to play. The image that appeared on the screen made her blood run cold. It was Marcus, in the office, hours before the meeting. He was talking to someone outside the camera frame. "It's all set," he said with a cruel smile. "If the old woman doesn't sell, we destroy the company from within. Mr. Watanabe is already in my pocket, or at least that's what he thinks." The sound of Marcus's voice, distorted and metallic, coming from the laptop's small speakers, seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. "Mr. Watanabe is already in my pocket, Or at least that's what he thinks. The phrase echoed in Yumi's mind, repeating in a torturous loop. For an instant, the world around her vanished. The financial crisis, the race against time, the anxious faces of the partners, everything faded into a distant buzz. What remained was the image of Mr. Watanabe, her husband's loyal friend, the man who had sought her out, who had encouraged her to execute this risky plan to save the company, being painted as a traitor. Marcus's betrayal was that of a greedy stranger. Watanabe's potential betrayal was a knife plunged into the heart of Kenji's legacy, into the very memory of their friendship and mutual trust. The inheritance her husband left her was not just of assets and property, but of relationships built on honor. And now, the strongest pillar of that foundation was cracking before her eyes. She felt Rob's gaze on her, questioning, but she couldn't tear her eyes from the screen. The hand holding the mouse trembled slightly. Could it be possible? Was Marcus arrogant enough to boast of an alliance that didn't exist, just to inflate his own importance? Or was Watanabe a masterful actor, a master of deception who manipulated her from the start, perhaps aiming to seize total control of the company's capital for the Japanese conglomerate, using the crisis forged by Marcus as a pretext? Doubt was a poison that spread rapidly through her veins. She discreetly glanced across the room. Watanabe was on the phone, speaking in Japanese with imperturbable calm, his expression that of a wise and concerned advisor. Nothing in his posture betrayed duplicity. He was the image of loyalty, which made the accusation in the video even more monstrous and her uncertainty unbearable. She was alone, completely alone. The only person she fully trusted in that hostile environment was now the greatest source of her fear. She knew she couldn't continue with that burden. The truth, however ugly, needed to come to light. Ignoring that video would be like building a new structure on a minefield. She closed the laptop with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. All eyes turned to her. "We found something," she said, her voice controlled, but with an edge of steel that hadn't been there before. "Something that changes everything." She stood up and walked toward Mr. Watanabe, who had finished his call and was watching her with an expression of attentive curiosity. She stopped a few feet from him, the laptop in her hands, as if it were a Pandora's box. "Mr. Watanabe," she said, the formal address intentional, a barrier she erected between them. "I would like you to see this. I believe it is in your best interest." Without waiting for a response, she opened the laptop on the table, positioning it so that only the two of them could see the screen clearly, but the audio could be heard by everyone. The other partners leaned forward, curiosity and anxiety etched on their faces. Yumi didn't look at the screen this time. Her eyes were fixed, unblinking, on Mr. Watanabe's face. She pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the air again, arrogant and conspiratorial. When the fateful phrase was spoken, "Mr. Watanabe is already in my pocket," a shocked murmur ran through the room. Rob looked at Watanabe with disbelief. Yumi continued to stare at the old friend, searching for any sign, any muscle twitch, any flash of panic in his eyes that could confirm or deny the accusation. The video ended. The silence that followed was the heaviest of all. The expression of concern and surprise on Mr. Watanabe's face did not dissolve into hasty denials or anger. Instead, it slowly melted away, like dissolving wax, being replaced by a coolness Yumi had never seen. The cordiality vanished, and his eyes, previously paternal, now stared at her with a chilling, impenetrable intensity. He said nothing, and his silence was the most terrifying answer she could have imagined. Mr. Watanabe's silence was not an emptiness. It was a presence, a force that pressed down on Yumi, stealing her air. Every second that stretched in that silence was a tacit confirmation of her worst fears. An abyss opened at her feet, and she looked into it, seeing not only the ruin of her company, but the profanation of her most sacred memories. The friendship between Kenji and Watanabe was legendary, forged in pacts of honor, sealed with a handshake, worth more than any signed contract. To see the face of the man who wept on her shoulder at her husband's funeral transform into that mask of impenetrable coldness was a pain more acute than the loss of any fortune. She felt the ground disappear, the confidence that was her anchor in this world of corporate sharks coming loose, leaving her adrift in an ocean of betrayal. The other partners in the room seemed to have shrunk in their chairs, their frightened glances darting between Yumi and the impassive Japanese investor, understanding that the crisis had just deepened from a matter of money to a war of loyalties. Finally, Watanabe spoke. His voice, devoid of any warmth, cut through the tension. "You trust the desperate words of a dishonored man, Yumi-san?" He didn't call her Madam Tanaka, the respectful formality, but used the Yumi-san of an old friend, making the coldness of his tone even more cutting. "Marcus promised everyone a piece of heaven. He promised me stability and guaranteed profits for our conglomerate stock. I listened. Listening is not agreeing." The denial was technically present, but its essence was hollow, evasive. He offered no comfort, made no attempt to reaffirm his loyalty. Instead, he challenged her, subtly casting doubt on her judgment. "We are wasting precious time with theater. The real problem," he said, his gaze sweeping the room and settling back on her with unquestionable authority, "is that my investment, the capital that keeps this company alive, is at risk, and I will do what is necessary to protect it." The threat was veiled, but crystal clear. He still held the power, and his ultimate loyalty was to his own assets, not to Kenji's memory. A wave of fury and clarity swept over Yumi, extinguishing the paralyzing pain. She would not crumble, not in front of him, not in front of these men. She raised an armor of ice around her wounded heart and found the strength to lead. If she was alone, so be it. She would fight alone. "Your assessment is correct, Mr. Watanabe," she replied, her voice sounding surprisingly calm and firm. "We are indeed wasting time." She turned to the others, deliberately ignoring him, reassuming command. "The plan does not change. We continue the reconstruction of our books. Rob, what is the status of the department heads?" Her ability to compartmentalize pain and focus on the task shocked the room, restoring a sense of order to the chaos. Rob, though visibly shaken by the scene, straightened up. "They are on their way, madam. The accounting team is already gathering in the conference room downstairs." "Excellent," Yumi said. Let's get to work." She moved away from the group, returning to the CEO's desk, feeling Watanabe's gaze on her back. She sat down and opened the laptop again. The Phoenix Project was her only ally now. Marcus's video was just the tip of the iceberg. She needed to know what else was there, what Watanabe was so anxious to protect. Navigating the encrypted folders, her intuition guided her to one called Hidden Transactions. She opened it. Inside, there was a series of fund transfer records, huge sums of money being moved through a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts. A classic money laundering scheme to hide the final destination of the resources. She followed the digital trail, the clandestine cash flow, her heart pounding against her ribs. The transfers were to the CEO of Ventura Global Partners' biggest competitor. It was corporate espionage and sabotage at the highest level. But then, she saw a final line of transactions, smaller but regular, directed to a private investment fund. With a click, she opened the fund details. The name of the manager and primary beneficiary made her blood run cold for the second time that night. It wasn't a competitor, it was Rob's father. The name on the computer screen seemed to pulse with a malicious life of its own. Rob's father, the young man who had presented himself as a bastion of integrity. The only helping hand in that viper's nest was now irrevocably stained by corruption. Watanabe's betrayal had been a blow to the heart. This was a slow, cruel twist of the knife. Yumi felt a cold nausea rise in her throat. Every pillar of trust she had tried to lean on crumbled into sand. She was on an island, and the tide of deception was rising relentlessly, threatening to drown her. Her first instinct was to confront him, throw the truth in his face and see if the mask of sincerity broke. But she held back. What good would it do? If he was complicit, he would deny everything. If he was innocent, the revelation would destroy him and make him useless for the task ahead. Worse, it could alert his father and, by extension, Marcus, that she knew. No, for now, knowledge was a weapon she had to wield alone. She minimized the window, the toxic secret now hidden under the appearance of a cash flow spreadsheet. As she looked up, she saw Rob across the room, coordinating the arrival of the department heads with calm, focused efficiency. He looked like the picture of dedication. Could it be possible that he didn't know that his father, a renowned fund manager, was involved in shady dealings without his son's knowledge? The world of big money was complex. Fortunes were made and lost in webs of investment so tangled that it was easy for the right hand not to know what the left was doing. Perhaps Rob was just a pawn, his admiration for Ventura Global Partners genuine but exploited by a greedy father. Or perhaps his sincerity was the perfect camouflage, a calculated act to gain her trust, while his father helped bleed the company dry. The uncertainty was torture. Madam Tanaka. A woman's voice pulled her from her thoughts. It was Helen, the head of accounting, a grey-haired woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose, who had worked at the company since Kenji's time. Her eyes were full of concern. Rob told us that there's an emergency, that Mr. Marcus's reports were incorrect. Yumi stood up, forcing a semblance of calm authority. Incorrect is an understatement, Helen. They were a fiction, and we have until the market opens tomorrow to find the truth. She looked at the group of managers gathered, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion. I know it's late, and what I'm asking seems impossible, but the survival of this company, the employment of each of you and your teams, depends on what we do in the next few hours. I need loyalty. I need the truth. As she gave instructions, assigning teams to scour physical records and cross-reference data from different sectors, she watched Rob out of the corner of her eye. He moved among the groups, helping, clarifying doubts, his commitment seemingly unwavering. At one point, their eyes met across the room. He gave her a small, encouraging smile, a gesture that, hours ago, would have comforted her. Now, it filled her with a cold premonition. That flash drive, the Phoenix Project, was a dossier of secrets. Who had assembled it and why? The anonymous message that led her to it now seemed less like an act of help and more like a piece in a much larger and more dangerous game than she imagined. She was being guided, manipulated by a ghost who knew all of Ventura Global Partners' dirty laundry. With the reconstruction operation underway, Yumi returned to her workstation, needing a moment to breathe. She opened the Hidden Transactions folder again, the need to understand overcoming the risk. Her eyes scanned the data lines, looking for any other connection, any other clue. That's when she saw it, a short annotation next to the last transfer to Rob's father's fund, added by the dossier creator. It read, "Final payment for the acquisition of internal assets, approved by R.A.E." The initials hovered on the screen, burning into her retina. R.A. Robert Adams. The approval wasn't from the father, it was from the son. The initials R.A. hovered on the screen, cold and accusatory. For an instant, the hum of the crisis room vanished, and Yumi was engulfed by a deafening silence. The shock was not explosive, but implosive, an internal collapse of her last hope. Rob, the sincere young man, the unexpected ally, the face that offered her a spark of faith in humanity amidst corporate greed. His betrayal was, in a way, the most painful of all. Marcus was an evident predator, Watanabe, a devastating disappointment, but Rob had nestled into her trust with a mask of decency. She felt a cold nausea rise in her throat. Every pillar of trust she had tried to rely on collapsed into sand. She was on an island, and the tide of deception was rising relentlessly, threatening to drown her. Her first instinct was to confront him, throw the truth in his face, and see if the mask of sincerity broke. But she held back. What good would it do? If he was complicit, he would deny everything. If he was innocent, the revelation would destroy him and make him useless for the task ahead. Worse, it could alert his father and, by extension, Marcus, that she knew. No, for now, knowledge was a weapon she should wield alone. She minimized the window, the toxic secret now hidden under the appearance of a cash flow spreadsheet. As she looked up, she saw Rob across the room, coordinating the arrival of the department heads with calm, focused efficiency. He looked like the picture of dedication. Could it be possible that he didn't know that his father, a renowned fund manager, was involved in shady dealings without his son's knowledge? The world of big money was complex. Fortunes were made and lost in webs of investment so tangled that it was easy for the right hand not to know what the left was doing. Perhaps Rob was just a pawn, his admiration for Ventura Global Partners genuine but exploited by a greedy father. Or perhaps his sincerity was the perfect camouflage, a calculated act to gain her trust while his father helped bleed the company dry. The uncertainty was torture. Madam Tanaka? His voice, too close, made her flinch. Rob was beside her desk, holding a porcelain cup. "You haven't touched your coffee. I thought I'd bring a fresh one. You must be exhausted." The gesture, which minutes before would have seemed kind, was now grotesque, a cruel staging. She looked at his face, searching for any fissure in the mask, any sign of the duplicity hidden behind those serious, attentive eyes. There was none. He was a perfect actor. "Thank you, Rob," she said, her voice sounding surprisingly neutral. "Put it on the table, please." He smiled, the same encouraging smile as before. "We're making good progress. Helen is a genius. She's finding inconsistencies no one else would see. I think we'll make it." He walked away to help another manager, and Yumi watched him go, her stomach churning. He was overseeing the investigation of his own crime. With steady hands, she returned to the dossier. She needed more. The initials were a condemnation, but she wanted the smoking gun. She navigated the folders, finding a section called Internal Communications. Inside, there were logs from an encrypted messaging system, one that didn't belong to the company's official channels. She opened the most recent file. It was a record of conversations between Marcus and Rob. The words on the screen were brutal in their clarity. "The old woman is poking around too much," Marcus wrote. "She's on my computer. Did you wipe everything on your end?" Rob's answer was quick, cold, and efficient. "All clean. The backups were the first to disappear. As I suggested, she can search all she wants. She won't find anything linking us. The money has already been moved through my father's fund. It's a clean asset now. When the dust settles, we'll have the capital to start our own firm." It wasn't just complicity. It was a partnership. Rob wasn't a follower. He was an architect of the fraud, even more dangerous for his intelligence and his ability to simulate loyalty. Yumi felt the ice solidify in her veins. She had everything she needed to expose him. But how? A direct confrontation could make him flee, or worse, trigger some contingency plan to permanently destroy the data. She needed to corner him, leave him with no escape. As she pondered her strategy, Helen, the head of accounting, approached, her face pale and wrinkled with worry. She carried a thick ledger, one of the few records still kept on paper at Kenji's insistence. Madam Tanaka, sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice low and trembling. I found something that makes no sense. She opened the book to a marked page. This transaction, a large transfer of funds to one of our technology suppliers, made last month. The amount is exorbitant, and what's strange, Helen pointed to the authorization line. It was authenticated with a digital signature, a signature that, according to our oldest security protocols, could only be generated by a physical token that belonged only to you and the late Mr. Kenji. Helen's revelation struck Yumi with the force of a profanity. The fund diversion, the fraud, the stock market manipulation, all of it was a violation of the business she built. But the use of Kenji's digital signature, that was a violation of his soul. That token wasn't just a security device. It was a relic. She remembered the day they received it, years ago. Kenji held it in the palm of his hand and said, with a smile, that it was the key to their future, a digital symbol of the bond and trust they shared. It was the modern equivalent of a personal treasure, an asset of incalculable value that transcended any net worth. The idea that Marcus and Rob's dirty hands had touched, used, and corrupted that sacred symbol to steal and deceive ignited a cold, purifying fury within her. Pain gave way to iron determination. This was no longer just about saving the company. It was about restoring Kenji's honor. She knew exactly where the token should be. In the personal safe, hidden behind a false panel in the bookcase of his old office, the office that now belonged to Marcus. It was a place only she and Kenji knew. How did they find it? The thought was chilling. It meant Rob's betrayal wasn't just digital and opportunistic, it was physical, invasive, and meticulously planned. He must have scoured every inch of that space, hunting down their most closely guarded secrets. The young man she saw as a potential heir to the company's values was, in fact, a grave robber, looting the memories of her past to fund his illicit future. She needed to get to that office. She needed to confirm if the token was still there or if they had taken it. But how? Without raising suspicions. Rob watched her like a hawk. His false solicitude was a form of surveillance. Watanabe, in turn, remained like an ice statue, his silence a constant pressure. She needed a distraction, a task that would completely occupy Rob and get him out of her way. Looking at the clutter of papers and people, an idea formed. "Rob!" she called, her voice sounding calm and in control. He approached immediately. "Helen found the starting point we needed," she said, gesturing to the ledger. But the raw data is scattered across the backup servers we managed to recover. It's a mess. I need you to cross-reference the numbers from this book with the digital transaction logs. It's a complex task that requires total focus. Take Helen and her team to the main conference room, where they'll have more space. Isolate yourselves and don't stop until you find all the discrepancies. Understood? Rob nodded, his face serious and intent. "Yes, madam." Immediately, the perfect bait, a critical mission that placed him at the center of the solution, feeding his ego and keeping him away from her. As he gathered the team, Yumi addressed the remaining partners. "While they handle the details, we need a communication strategy. Come with me." She led them toward the corridor, past the conference room where Rob was now immersed in data, and continued to Marcus's office door. "We'll use this room. It's more private." She opened the door and entered, the others following. The smell was different, permeated with Marcus's expensive cologne and arrogance. But underneath, it was still Kenji's space. The mahogany desk, the leather armchair, the city view. She felt a knot in her throat but pushed it down. "Discuss among yourselves what our initial statement to the press will be," she ordered. "I need a moment." Leaving them in a confused debate, she walked to the bookcase, her heart pounding. Her back was turned to them, hiding her actions. Her fingers found the secret notch in the wood. The panel opened with a silent click. Behind it, the small digital safe. She typed the code, a date only she and Kenji would know. The door opened. Inside was the small velvet box where the token was kept. With trembling hands, she opened it. It was empty. And then a sound behind her made her freeze. The soft click of the office door closing. "Looking for something, Madam Tanaka." Rob's voice, stripped of all its false sympathy, was cold as death. The sound of Rob's voice was like a trap snapping shut. Yumi turned slowly, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a glacial fury that clarified her thoughts. The mask had fallen. Standing before her was not the idealistic young man, but a stranger with cold, calculating eyes. Marcus's smug smile mirrored on a younger face. He stood in front of the door, blocking the only exit. The other partners had disappeared. He must have dismissed them with some clever excuse. They were alone. The empty velvet box in her hands seemed to weigh a ton, a symbol of her violation. "I underestimated you," she said, her voice firm, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her tremble. The performance was impeccable. Rob took a step forward. The veneer of respect replaced by brazen arrogance. "And you overestimated everyone's loyalty. Nostalgia doesn't pay dividends, Madam Tanaka. Your husband was a man of honor, but honor has no place in the current market. It's just a liability." Every word was a deliberate insult, designed to hurt, to destabilize her. But instead of pain, Yumi felt a surge of power. He saw her as a relic, a sentimental widow clinging to the past. He didn't see the woman who had built an empire alongside her husband, the woman who understood business and people with a depth that he, in his youth and greed, could never grasp. "And does fraud," she retorted, her tone cutting. "Did you and Marcus think you could loot this company, destroy the assets of thousands of employees and shareholders, and simply walk away with pockets full of dirty money?" Rob laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Money is money. Once it's laundered, it's as clean as yours. We planned this for months. The Japanese acquisition was the perfect opportunity. With the transition, no one would notice the discrepancies, and the blame would fall on the former management, your management." He took a small object from his pocket. It was the token. He twirled it lazily between his fingers. This was the finishing touch, the key to the vaults. To think a password based on a wedding anniversary was secure, so sentimental, so predictable. Yumi's anger transformed into intense focus. She needed to buy time. She needed a way to turn the tables. She looked at the desk, at the phone, at the window. No escape. Her only weapon was what she knew. "And Mr. Watanabe?" she asked, her voice casual, probing. "Was he part of your plan from the start?" Rob hesitated for an instant, a flash of uncertainty in his eyes. "Watanabe is a businessman. He aligns with power. When I won, he would be on our side." The answer confirmed Yumi's suspicions. Watanabe wasn't a total traitor, but an opportunist, waiting to see who would come out on top. This was a weakness she could exploit. "You are wrong," she said, her voice carrying an unshakable conviction. "You talk about business, profit, assets, but you understand nothing about true value. This company isn't just a set of numbers. It is a web of relationships, of trust. It is the legacy of a good man, and that is something you cannot steal with a token." As she spoke, she discreetly moved her hand toward Marcus's laptop, which was still open on the desk. With her fingertips, she activated the trackpad, waking the screen. "You made a mistake," she continued, maintaining eye contact with Rob, her voice holding his attention. "You thought I was alone. But Kenji's spirit still lives in this place, in loyal employees like Helen, in partners who value honor over profit." The bluff was bold, but her faith in Kenji was real, and that faith gave power to her words. The laptop screen lit up, showing the Phoenix Project folder. Rob frowned, his gaze shifting for a fraction of a second to the screen's glare. It was the opening Yumi needed. With a swift movement, she grabbed the heavy laptop and threw it with all her might, not at him, but at the glass wall that looked out onto the main corridor, where she knew the security guards patrolled. The sound of the glass shattering was explosive, echoing through the silent floor like a gunshot. Rob flinched, instinctively shielding himself from the shards. At that exact moment, the office door burst open, but it wasn't a security guard. It was Mr. Watanabe. His eyes were not on Yumi. They were fixed, with a cold, surprising fury, on Rob, and in his hand he held a phone with an audio call still active. "I have heard enough, Adam's son," Watanabe said, his voice resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt. "You have insulted not only Madame Tanaka, but the memory of my friend, and that is a miscalculation your net worth will not be able to cover." Rob's face twisted into a mask of disbelief and panic. The arrogance he wore like armor shattered as completely as the glass wall. He looked from Yumi to Watanabe, his mind spinning, searching for a lie, an escape, but there was none. The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor announced the arrival of the security guards, drawn by the noise. They stopped at the door, assessing the scene with trained professionalism. The broken glass wall, the woman standing with regal calm, the cornered young executive, and the principal investor holding a phone as if it were a weapon. Watanabe made a dry gesture with his head. "Please escort Mr. Adams out of the building. He no longer works here. Ensure he takes nothing that is not strictly personal." Rob did not resist. The fire in his eyes had extinguished, leaving only the ashes of defeat. As the security guards escorted him away, his gaze met Yumi's one last time. There was no anger, only a hollow emptiness. And in that moment, Yumi felt no triumph, only a deep and bitter sadness for the loss of potential, for the corruption of a young soul seeking an easy fortune. When the door closed, a heavy silence took hold of the office, broken only by the whistle of the wind through the broken glass. Yumi turned to Watanabe, the question hanging between them without needing to be spoken. The old friend finally lowered the mask of coldness, and in his eyes, she saw the return of a familiar grief. Forgive me, Yumi-san," he said, his voice low. "When I saw that video, the poison of doubt entered my heart. But my faith in Kenji and in you was stronger. I needed to see, to hear with my own ears, who the real traitor was." He explained that, seeing Rob following her, he suspected a trap. He called his own cell phone from the conference room phone and left it on the table with the call active, a hidden microphone so he could hear the truth wherever he was. "Your courage in confronting him, your defense of Kenji's honor. You reminded me of him. He would be immensely proud." Yumi felt the knot of ice in her chest begin to melt. Trust, once broken, rarely recovers. But there, in that destroyed office, an old and essential bond was being reforged, stronger than before. "What do we do now?" she asked, her mind returning to the imminent crisis. The stock market would open in a few hours. Watanabe walked toward her, his face now that of an unshakable ally. "Now we fight with the truth. The Phoenix Project is our sword. It contains all the proof we need to expose Marcus and Rob's fraud." He placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of paternal support. "I will speak with the board in Japan. We will present the evidence and my testimony. The conglomerate will provide all the necessary financial and legal support to stabilize the company. We will hide nothing. We will issue an official statement to the SEC and the press, revealing the attempted fraud, the terminations, and your return to command. It will be a scandal, yes. Our stock will suffer in the short term, but honesty will rebuild trust much faster than any lie." Yumi nodded, feeling the weight of the world beginning to lift from her shoulders. The path would be difficult, but now it was clear. Ventura Global Partners. True wealth was not in its financial assets, but in the human capital that remained and the integrity she was determined to restore. She looked through the hole in the glass wall toward the conference room where Helen and her team were still working, oblivious to the drama. They were the future. She had cleaned house. Now, it was time to rebuild the home. The first light of morning poured through the broken glass, painting Marcus's office in soft shades of gold and rose. The new day did not bring the financial apocalypse everyone feared. On the contrary, it brought an exhaustive clarity. Following Watanabe's advice, Yumi acted with a speed and transparency that shook the market. Before the stock market opened, an official statement was sent, detailing the attempted fraud, the summary termination of those involved, and the return to control by the founder, Yumi Tanaka. The brutal honesty was a shock. As predicted, Ventura Global Partners stock plunged in the first minutes of trading, a capital hemorrhage caused by fear. But then, something remarkable happened. Long-term investors, funds that valued governance and ethics, began to buy. The fall stopped, stabilized, and slowly began to reverse. The message was clear. Honor, after all, was still a valuable asset. Yumi did not spend the morning watching stock charts. She spent it in the conference room with Helen and the teams who had worked through the night. She thanked each one personally, looking them in the eye, learning their names. She announced that a new profit-sharing program would be implemented, ensuring their dedication would be rewarded not just with salaries, but with a share of the success they helped save. For the first time in years, genuine applause, full of hope, echoed through the executive corridors. The old culture of fear and greed, where millionaire bonuses were planned in secret, was being dismantled, replaced by one of respect and shared prosperity. The real business she and Kenji dreamed of was being reborn. Later that day, Yumi was alone in what had been her husband's office. The glass wall was already being replaced, and the smell of cleaning products, ironically, filled the air. She sat in the large leather chair, not as a usurper, but as a guardian. On the desk, instead of fraudulent reports, was a single photograph in a silver frame, her and Kenji on the day they opened their first small office, young, exhausted, and radiant. She realized then that the inheritance he left her was far greater than the stocks, the assets, or the immense net worth. It was a moral compass, a legacy of integrity that, in the end, proved to be the most powerful tool for salvation. The fortune they built was not only in bank vaults, but in the loyalty of an accountant like